to any like political issue, like an article about any?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Can
Wait,
you
does it? Okay, we go.
can you see me or see the screen?
Saturday, you need to press. Yeah.
Wait, sir, does it only have to be in Canada or like can it be like anywhere else?
Does it what? Who's going to the bathroom there?
Do I keep my mic on?
Who's I?
Sada.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, there's going to be a presenter, and then
Yeah, okay. So I didn't know if that was because I had my mic on.
oh,
Okay.
because you went to the bathroom with the mic on. What?
No. I was going to the washroom.
Okay.
Okay, so you guys can see everything?
Yeah.
Yeah? Awesome. So I'm doing mine on the Equal Rights Amendment. So firstly, I want to speak about what bias is. So bias, by definition, is the prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. What sources of information could you reasonably expect to be fact-based? I believe the greatest fact-based sources would include anything regarding science, math, and codified laws because they're uninterpretable. So like research papers, data analysis, labs, scientific reports, Criminal Code of Justice, Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms are very set things that you can't add in your own opinion. So what sources of information might you find to be biased? Anything with human influence to me would be biased. News outlets, interviews, history textbooks, depending on which country you're from, journalist articles, blogs. I feel this way because I think anything produced by humans, no matter what, will end up being biased if it's coming from our opinion, if we're expressing a topic. So it's not something that will ever be right or wrong. I just think depending on where you're from, your history, how you've grown up, you evidently will always end up having an opinion, and that can creep in when you're, writing doing an interview, writing a journal article. So what is the ERA? The Equal Rights Amendment is a proposed amendment to the United States Constitution designed to guarantee equal legal rights for all American citizens, regardless of sex. It seeks to end legal discrimination between men and women in terms of divorce, property, employment, and other matters. So the history of this amendment: in 1923, the amendment was written by the members of the National Woman's Party. Specifically, the ERA was written by Alice Paul. Paul's crusade was unsuccessful. Martha Griffiths was elected into the House as a Michigan congresswoman in 1954. She introduced the amendment every year, and in 1970, Griffiths filed a discharge petition, which resulted in an amendment being passed by the House. It passed the House on October 12, 1971, and the Senate on March 22, 1972. However, it was not ratified because it did not fulfill the prerequisite of a majority of 38 states. So this is a map to show what portions of the US have ratified the ERA and have not. So that's just, you could click that to see. So the ERA is not a part of the Constitution. However, because Virginia's recent ratification fulfills the requirement for 3/4 of the states to ratify a constitutional amendment, this January 15th, Virginia became the 30th state to vote in favor of the ratification. Sorry. However, Congress had put this deadline on the ratification and the ERA. So the ERA can become, if the deadline is repealed, the ERA can become implemented within the Constitution. So recently, lawmakers voted 232 to 183, which would have the power to pass a legislation repealing the 1982 deadline, allowing states to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. Only 5 Republicans voted in favor of the ERA. And even more recently, February 15th, 2020, the U.S. House gave the Equal Rights Amendment a temporary new lease on ratification. The House voted to remove the 1982 deadline for ratification by the states, granting the ERAs a possible chance of being ratified. Why do Republicans remain opposed to the amendment? The amendment's potential implications of pay equity, parental leave, pregnancy accommodation for workers, transgender rights, the possibility of the government needing to pay for abortions, and abortions overall are multiple reasons why they disagree with this amendment and are opposed to it. For the media's response, the debate over the ERA has been an ongoing one. Multiple news outlets have expressed either their support or distaste regarding the topic. So I have a question. Who do you think, if you know anything about American politics, who do you think is the most biased news outlet in the US?
One American News.
What American News?
One America News Network. I think that's the exact name.
Yeah, so the US is notorious for extremely biased news outlets. So this is a diagram that displays a media bias chart and is only for online content. So you can see from the left side all the way to the right side where certain outlets fall and what you can expect to see when you go research certain topics when it comes to politics within the United States. So the support for the ERA. Multiple outlets have written articles supporting the ERA. For example, this New York Times post displays what the ERA is trying to achieve. Supporters say adopting the ERA would, among other things, sweep away discrimination in the workplace, help women to achieve pay equality, and allow men to get paid for paternity leave, require states to intervene in the case of domestic violence and sexual harassment, and guards against discrimination based on pregnancy and motherhood. It may bolster protections for gay and transgender people as well. Furthermore, these articles also have displayed a common front of confidence and cohesion within the House, and especially female leaders within the House, like the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, talks to reporters on February 13th in favor of the ratification process. However, negative media coverage is inevitable. So this was actually really funny when doing the research. So this is actually an article because the ERA has been in talks now for so long. This is an article from 2018. So the title of the article is "The Equal Rights Amendment is a Feminist Ruse," and an excerpt from it goes, "After decades of the left's insistence that the U.S. culture has made steady moral progress, we're now told that, in fact, American women are still stuck in the 1950s. As punishment for our cultural sins, the debate over the Equal Rights Amendment is back, courtesy of feminists increasingly embittered by the presidency of Donald Trump." Furthermore, newer news articles, January 2nd, 2020, display also another negative media response. If you pay attention to the wording in many of these articles, it's not only very funny, but it shows almost a sense of propaganda. So as America, this shows how the left is trying to resurrect the unnecessary Equal Rights Amendment. And an excerpt from this is, "As America enters a new decade, progressives are stepping boldly into the bra-burning feminism of the 1970s. Specifically, they're trying to resurrect the Equal Rights Amendment, the radical feminist constitutional amendment the rest of us had long thought a dead issue. Opponents must prepare to argue on the substance. Men and women are already equal under American law, but they aren't the same, and that's how it should be." So why are they opposing, and what are their arguments as of right now? So anti-discrimination laws could be used by what they call radicals to force women to be drafted into combat, disallow separate sex bathrooms, even pull government funding from women's shelters. In New Mexico and Connecticut state level ERAs have been interpreted as requiring government funding for abortion. Another excerpt says, "If they manage to ratify a dubious constitutional proposition, they can enshrine left-wing gender dogmas into the highest level of the land." So another few articles that display opposition can be seen when Republican Whip Steve Scalise spoke and was interviewed. Everyone knows this renewed effort isn't about women's rights, the office House Republican Whip Steve Scalise said, summarizing the message being relayed to the GOP caucus is about eliminating federal and state life protections and ushering in an era of taxpayer funding abortion. So it was very interesting on the part of someone that was researching it to see the difference between how media portrays the ERA, dependent on which side of the political spectrum you fall on. So my questions for the class are, what is your opinion on the ERA? Do you think the states should move forward in the ratification process? And that's, oh, you can answer that. Should I?
I was totally sure you would talk about Ruth Bader Ginsburg in there.
Yeah, no, I thought I was going to too. Unfortunately, she didn't. I don't know.
Didn't
Yeah.
what?
Ruth Bader. Oh my god. Ruth Bader Bate. Oh my gosh. RBG. Sorry, can I? I'm trying to figure out how to unshare my screen. Is it unshared?
Yeah, I don't see it. I just see your picture. Not even you, just your picture. Yeah.
Okay, so honestly, I didn't find many articles. I guess I wasn't looking for it enough, which would have been really interesting to have found her perspective on it, which is probably evidently in favor of it. But yeah, no, I didn't find many articles where she spoke about it.
Cool. Interesting. Anyone have anything to say? Natalie?
It was really well done.
Okay, good. Good. Yeah, it's a interesting topic because, some people talk about equal rights as being something progressive. And, the rise in the ultra left and the ultra right has kind of pitted the two sides against each other and made them become extremes. So when you look at some of the articles you just posted as examples, they're very extreme. If this happens, then that's going to happen, right? So be scared. And that's a good example of how the media twists things, right? The whole abortion thing. If they ratify the ERA, that means that people get free abortions everywhere and they're encouraged to get abortions, and then all of a sudden no one's going to live and then the population's going to die, right? In philosophy class, we call that the slippery slope, right?
Sir, about abortions, I was thinking, when you die and you want to give your organs,
yeah,
if you don't consent to it, you don't have an organ donation card, they can't take your organ bodies, even though you're dead, and then you don't need it.
I think
And
that's
when you're dead, you have more
to decide.
Hmm?
Wouldn't it be passed down to their families to decide?
Well,
yeah,
well,
your family has to consent to, but
no, I don't think that's the case. I think, well, firstly, every country has different laws, right? There are some countries,
Yeah,
I
for
can't remember what it
Canada.
was, on the news. I think it's, I don't know. I'm not even going to guess. Somewhere, maybe Sweden or something, basically passed a law recently saying if you don't sign the card, then you'll automatically be put last in place if you need a organ. In Canada, when you got your licenses, some of you got your licenses, you'll notice that they sent you a card, or maybe you sign it right when you get the test. I don't know, but are you going to be an organ donor, right?
So I
And-
just got it before I even got my license.
Really?
But I think it also
Yeah.
has something to do with religion, because there are like separate religions that don't believe in, messing around with the body after death.
Yeah.
So I like that does play a big part in it as to why someone would decide not to do so.
Sure. And there's other factors too besides religion. There's, the thought process that some people have that if I sign the organ donor card and I'm, caught in an accident and I need help, and the doctors see that I have the organ donor card, then they're not going to help me, because what's one life versus saving a whole bunch of other lives with your organ, right? These are just ways that people think, and it's all politics. Of course, religion has something to do with it too. And you'll notice that, especially in the States with the far left and far right, even though, it's supposed to be a separation of church and state, it's not really how it works. Not in the States either. And sometimes the right has certain viewpoints that are religious, and the left have certain viewpoints that are more universal. But again, extremes. And the fight between the left and the right has caused even more extremes to occur. So,
I think
Canada, yeah, go ahead.
Personally, when doing the research, when searching on the opposing party's side regarding the amendment, I think I was most shocked with the wording. The publishing of how they decided to describe it. It was exactly what you're saying, like extreme to the most, like bra-burning feminists, radicals. Like
Name calling, right?
Yeah, and it was insane to like see that kind of perspective, and someone believed, like someone was writing that with the belief that was like it. And there's other people in the world that read it and you're like, yeah, this is right. It's
Maybe they don't believe it.
Well, I mean,
It's
you don't
just
write
that they
something
want
you don't
other people to believe that,
But then why would you write something that you don't believe?
because it benefits you that
Influence.
other people believe that.
No,
People
but
to read news sources that, fit with their belief
Yeah.
system, right? People who are very far right wing or right wing will read right wing publications or watch right wing television. Can you go back to that slide that you had just presented with the left or middle news publications?
Yeah, for sure.
There,
Because Trump is always talking about CNN News and Fox News, right? CNN on that graph is left leaning, Fox is right leaning. One loves and supports Trump, the other is always trying to figure out how to get, show Trump as in a negative light, right?
Yeah, most definitely.
And people usually join, or not join, but people usually follow the news articles that best fit their political views, right? Look at the ones on the far left, the Huffington Post, BuzzFeed. These are all, more left-leaning and often younger types of more progressive, if you will, news outlets, right? Whereas
There
the
are-
far right, pardon me?
Can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it.
Awesome.
And then when we talk about the most reputable news sources, they're often known as, BBC or USA Today or what have you, Wall Street Journal and the Associated Press. Why are those considered more reputable? Just by looking at this graph.
Because they're in the center.
Right. So they're in the center, which means by definition, they try to be least biased, right? Reuters news is considered to be, here are the facts type of news. Whereas, Fox News is all opinion. But so is BuzzFeed, so is Huffington Post. If you read their articles, there's much more editorialism. You know what editorialism is, right? Like what an editorial is? When a journalist writes an opinion, right? They also often call them op-eds or what have you. So yeah, I mean, if you research any articles, if you follow any of those people or groups, they're much more in line. So going back to Ruth Bader Ginsburg, does anybody know why she was so famous and why so many people are very nervous about what's happening now in the news with, especially today?
Yeah.
She was
sir,
the second woman to ever be a judge on the Supreme Court.
Uh-huh.
For
so,
America.
she also I watched this movie about her that there was this case that she basically like proved gender equality with this case. There was like gender discrimination against a man, and then she won that case in court, which was
Yeah.
like a really important case. And the other thing is that because she died before the election, now Trump can choose the next, Supreme Court judge, and then most probably it's going to be a Republican or a conservative, and then the balance wouldn't be the same. It's going to be like 5-4 or something. So
Well, and this
and
is what a lot of people. This is what a lot of people are nervous about right now, especially in the more left-leaning types of worldviews. Is that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is one of the reasons why even in Canada and in states especially there's maternity leave.
Mhm.
That if a woman has a job and she gets pregnant, that she can't be fired. Basically, we take it for granted in 2020, but you ask your parents, you ask your grandparents, what happened to them if they had jobs, the women in your family, and they got pregnant? And, especially if they lived in the Canada or the United States, many would get fired or many had to hide their pregnancy. Even today, unfortunately, there are women who have to hide their pregnancies, and we're not even talking about the abortion debate, because abortion is an extreme example. And that's why in all those articles that you chose to show, or at least many of them that come up in this ERA thing, is abortion. Because the right knows that it's such a sensitive topic and such an extreme topic that if they associate equal rights with abortion, then they might be able to get people who are on the fence to view against it, right? Because there are left-leaning people who, are not into abortion, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a black and white issue, but these alarmists know that if they write about it, people will listen, right? But Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right now, the idea was, and that typically, and some would say the right thing to do would be not to appoint the judge until after the election, right? The election's only 1.5 months away, 2 months away, November 3rd. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg, was a big balance in the power of left versus right, if you will. And today, Trump announced, or at least people are talking about this one lady who is the hopeful for the to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And she, I read an article this morning. She is she's part of a community that inspired The Handmaid's Tale. That's what the article
Oh
wrote,
my God.
right?
Very
So
conservative.
even though she's a woman, we're well past the idea that women and men have, women can't be in politics or women can't be a judge, right? That's even on the right side. You have to be very, very, very far right to think that women should be at home. But on the same token, these people still exist. And, as we go through this fight against the left to the right, we see people going even further right and further left. And so that article I read was obviously a left-leaning article, because they wouldn't write something like that if they were, as a warning. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Handmaid's Tale, but basically, it was Margaret Atwood's kind of prediction or forewarning that be careful, if you let the right win too much, that's where we're going to go, kind of thing. Like, that's what she was saying, right? And so, yeah, that's what we see. So it's a very interesting time we live in today because the right and the left have always existed. People have a left-leaning mentality or a right-leaning mentality, right? It's very difficult to be a centrist because you always have bias, right? And by definition, almost ironically, a centrist is a little bit left-leaning, right? Let me just go over. Does anybody understand the difference between a left-leaning mentality and a right-leaning mentality? Like, can anybody sum it up?
Yeah, so
Like if
like a left-leaning
yeah.
mentality is a lot more progressive, whereas a right-leaning mentality wants to conserve traditional values and stuff.
Okay, sure, right? So, you know, some would say, you know, if you were left-leaning, if you had the type of mentality of a left-leaning person, then, you know, I have my opinion and other people have their opinion, and, you know, through proper discourse, we can get along. A right-leaning person might say, well, my idea and my community is the right way. We've been doing it for a long time. This is how we do things. Your belief system is wrong. It sounds very drastic, but in a nutshell, it's very much how it plays out in the media and in politics, right? Whereas the left-leaners are like, well, let somebody get an abortion if they want to get abortion, right? It's not my body, that kind of stuff. The right will be like, no, you can't get abortion. You have to be illegal because, you know, it's bad and it harms life, that kind of stuff, right? So, you know, a lot of people even say that the, you know, younger people are more open, so they're progressive and more left-leaning, and often people warn that the older you get, the more right-leaning your brain, your mentality becomes. I don't agree with that, but some people agree with that. Although I should never tell you what I agree with or not, because I'm trying to be as neutral as possible. As those of you that have been in my classes before, I give you ideas, you make the decision, right? Ding dong, the witch is dead. Okay, you can
Sir,
pick that up.
also,
Yeah.
I think like compared to America doesn't really have a radical left. Like even if you look at the most leftist people in their government, they would still be considered like pretty moderates in our government.
Well, I
Like
think
I don't think a lot of people in
I don't know.
Canada
That's
think
that's a
like,
pretty opinionated
healthcare.
piece.
Yeah, but Bernie's a socialist.
Yeah, I don't think.
Bernie's a stock dem. He's not a true socialist.
He's a
No,
what?
you see, Bernie has been created in the media to be portrayed the way he is.
But
Bernie wants the same thing that Canada has, that UK has, that
Yeah.
Sweden has, that many countries in the world have, some of which are right-leaning.
yeah.
But there are some fundamental rights that the Americans seem not to have, injustices that other countries do have. You know, if you talk about healthcare, in Canada, we pay taxes for universal healthcare. If you do the math and work out how much per person a Canadian pays for universal healthcare, it's basically the same amount of money that an American pays for private healthcare. What's the difference? The difference is in Canada, we spread it so people who can't afford still get healthcare. In the United States, you can't afford it, you're out of luck, right? And Bernie Sanders, you know, has tried to tell people like, listen, how is that fair? The problem is the United States history is based on a capitalist, you know, fend for yourself type, you make you and your family rich type of mentality. And this is in their constitution. And they've always been fearful of any type of social reforms. Whereas in Canada, you know, even though we have a conservative party that leans to the right and a liberal party that leans to the left as our major parties, of course, there's NDP, which is much more left. Everybody has been more progressive in terms of social reforms historically in Canada than they ever have been in the States. And so what happens in the States with Bernie Sanders? He's painted in a certain light by certain media, right?
Yeah.
So the far right considers him to be a communist, right? The left considers him to be progressive. He's not an extremist. He has fought for the rights of people like many other people have. So that's your opinion to distinguish between what he is.
Yeah, sir, like both sides of media, they show him as like this very like crazy, loud, but like if you actually watch him like talk, he's not as like crazy, radical person that the media portrays him to be.
I actually haven't seen him portrayed as radical or
You
like
have
loud.
seen him?
No, he's
Well, like
they
I
always show him
portrayed as
loud.
very like radical in his ideologies, but not as like a loud person.
A loud person?
Yeah.
Uh-oh, we lost your connection. Here we go again, just like yesterday. Can you still see me?
Yeah.
Okay. And just like we saw in that movie, there was a reason why I started this course off with the death of Stalin, because it shows the absurdity of how individuals are painted by the media or by propaganda, right? It's you look at the things that Bernie Sanders has done. He's fought for the rights of people that, according to him, and many people, should have rights. The equal rights thing, one of the articles that you posted, Sada, was about how, careful, because then I'm paraphrasing and I half remember, but something about men getting paternity leave, right?
Yeah.
Was that a warning that would be bad, or what was
No,
what
it was in favor of men getting paternity leaves, like a single father.
Yeah.
That children would to be able to get a paternity leave.
So, even in Canada, today, men are allowed paternity leave as well as women, but there's still an unbalance. So let's say, for instance, there are certain companies and public and private that if a woman gets pregnant, has a kid, then they can take maternity leave, and while on maternity leave, they get unemployment insurance. So they don't get their salary, but the government gives them, that salary. And then for instance, some companies would give the female or the woman 10 weeks of full, like, top up the salary so that your salary is equal, at least for 10 weeks, to what you would have been getting as a normal pay. Do you understand how that works? Anyone confused about that? But even in 2020, there are companies that will only do that for the woman. So if the woman chooses not to take any time off or not to take a maternity leave, but the father chooses to take a paternity leave, the company or establishment will not give the father the top up. And this is 2020, right? So, there's still inequality, and I'm talking about Canada, so there's fear when we talk about this ERA thing, the rights, because of the extremes. So we see things like, anyone seen Brave New World yet, the new show, or read the book?
No,
I read the book.
So one thing that the right is afraid of, that the left wants, is, no more monogamy, no more privacy, no more, anything like that, relationships, no more gender, right? And they point out certain things that have occurred or are occurring in culture that they say, again, slippery slope, possibly. If we continue to let the left win, then, in the future, we will not be able to identify as male or female. We're all going to have to identify as null. Anybody can, do anything they want because it's their right to do anything they want. you know, and that becomes something very scary for certain people. Is it the case? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, again, it's hard to tell what the future will hold, right? But one key example is this pedophile thing that's happening all over the news.
Oh my God.
So, you know, there's some far left organizations that are trying to, you know, legitimize pedophilia and make it a, you know, in the classification of the LGBTQ plus community. So immediately you're like, oh my God, no, 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 right? The problem is that's not a lie. That's true. No, it's not. It's there's truth to it. Okay, Tyler, thanks, buddy. So for instance, Greece recently, you know, decriminalized it and established it as a mental health issue.
Wait,
Right?
pedophilia?
So, you know, in Canada, it's a crime. In Greece, it is now a mental health issue. So it's similar to drug addicts, where it used to be a crime to be a drug addict, but now it's not a crime. It is a, you know, a disease, right? And so there was a time when somebody in the far right would think, no, if you're on drugs, you're a criminal. But now, over the years, it has become something that even the right and the left both agree on for the most part, that drugs is an addiction, which isn't a disease, just like any other disease, and needs to be helped. So placing a drug addict into jail is not going to help them. Placing a drug addict into rehab will help them. Pedophilia is in the same boat, where there are people who are saying now that it's a mental health issue and people should be, you know, helped instead of being thrown into jail.
Well, I mean, like in the sense of even considering someone that's a drug addict, if they still use drugs, they still go to jail. So I think if someone's having pedophilic thoughts, you know, getting them help makes sense. But if they act on those thoughts, then they still should 100% go to jail, just the same way a drug addict who is mentally ill would still go to jail for abusing drugs.
Well, yeah, but people won't go to jail for drugs unless they're criminals, right? They'll go if they have legitimate reasons for their addictions, etc. The courts will most likely send them to rehab as their quote unquote jail.
You know, the
Hello?
biggest the priority
Hello?
is that like they
Hello?
shouldn't be in the society
Hello?
or
Right.
near
Hello?
children.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
You know, so these are things that when we talk about the extremes, they come out and then people immediately get really upset because these are very, very sensitive topics, you know, and the media, especially the far right and the far left, love to use these types of topics as what they write about because they know that people have very, very strong belief systems for them or against them. Excuse me.
Sir,
And,
also, okay, no.
What?
I had something to say, but like I was upstairs, so I like ran down to say it, but it's kind of late now. But adding on to what like Sarah said about thing, how if you commit the act like for pedophilia, then you should go to jail. But I don't know if I agree with that because if you have the mental illness, then you don't really know what you're doing. Like your actions are like you're not aware of them. So yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Within jail, like you can still be charged with an act and have psychiatric help within jail systems. Like you still, like it can't and it shouldn't diminish the responsibility one has over themselves because there's still a responsibility. Like it's
But this is exactly the point I'm making is that, Sarah, you think that, right? But then somebody who's an advocate for the topic will say, well, no, somebody can't control themselves. It's a disease. It's an addiction. I'm not even talking about drugs or pedophilia. I'm talking about anything that could be an addiction. One person would say, well, they should have controlled themselves and not robbed that bank.
It's also kind of like saying someone's schizophrenic, like they're seeing people, like why don't they just stop? Like they're in control.
But
of
it's also when I think there's enough, especially when it comes to pedophilia, there's laws, the media representation to say that it's obviously a wrong thing. So if you're someone that goes through those thought motions, you then also have some kind of responsibility to say that I need help. And then it becomes criminal it's negligence to go on otherwise.
Forget that. Let's talk about drugs. It's people think, do they all drug addicts think, you know what, I need help?
No, they think what they're doing
they
is fine. They don't know the effects it has on them.
They don't know the effects. So this is what I'm talking about. So this is all a great debate and how different people. Yes, Matthew.
I just don't think you can connect pedophiles and drugs. I think those are two really different things.
Yeah, I agree.
Right. That's my point.
I would connect pedophiles to like rapists.
But this is my point, is that there are people
They're not normal rapists
who think that it's very, very different. And there are people who think that it's very, very similar. Do you see what I mean? That's the point I'm trying to make.
Sure.
And yeah.
I was also in regards to like even a scientific aspect of it. The effects hard drugs have on someone's brain. Has there been any kind of research that displays any kind of similarity in the sense of this fetish, right? Because that also adds into, but it does. If someone when someone's addicted to drugs, it's a chemical imbalance, and there's dopamine releases that are insane. You're like tricking your body into thinking it needs something. Having some distorted sexual fantasy isn't on any kind of similar level.
Well, I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but I'm just going to present you the facts that, some people believe yes, some people believe no. And this is what distinguishes, left and right and center is when does it end, right?
Sir, but I don't think it's on what you believe. I mean, there should be a scientific, evidence behind it. Like, you can't just say, "Oh, I believe that." It's a mental illness. People used to believe hysteria was a mental illness.
Yeah, and a lot of people believe things without any kind of facts. That's the whole point. A lot of people believe things without any concrete evidence. You ever heard of the word faith? But I'm not joking. I'm serious. There's no reason or rhyme to how and what people think. It is just their bias, right? And I don't know if anyone of you ever took I guess you wouldn't have been or someone else's philosophy class. You're taking it this year. It's a huge part of the course of philosophy is bias and analyzing where your own personal biases come from and understanding that ideally in the world of philosophy, in the real world, that the belief that you have might potentially change or could change or there's an alternative way of thinking, right? But when we look at the extremists, they're far extreme in their belief systems, and they want nothing but to get other people to believe these extreme ideas. Hold on, I got to put Jacob into the. When somebody shows up to class late, can you please announce yourselves? All right. So yeah, we can talk about this stuff for hours, but I think we need to kind of move to something that's basically on the same type of angle, political culture, which is a great segue. So I did post a lot of stuff here, but let me see where I can. Sorry, go back to. Where am I going? We did the politics in the real world sort of yesterday. Okay, so there we go. Here. Let's take a look at political culture. Which one is it? Is it this one? All right. How do I present? So, political culture. You know, a lot of the stuff we're talking about today, especially, sir, the 3 assignments we have gotten so far is all that we need to hand in, right? There are... Okay. Now, societal beliefs, you know, this is very important. Religion and politics, ideology, exactly what we were talking about. So if you take a look at this compass here, or this sort of graph, it kind of outlines how everything fits into the world of political culture, right? So if you look at the subheadings, we have customs, skills, institutions, values, laws, symbols, expectations, beliefs. Sounds familiar. It looks just like what we study in, or what you study in grade 9 or 10 religion, or even the grade 11 religion, right? And you know, we often hear about the distinguishable features between religion and politics, right? Separate religion, politics, that's everything. But has that played out separately? Absolutely not. And we're going to look at how these things work, right? So culture, you guys remember what culture is? In what class did you really learn about culture? Grade 9, 10, 11, religion? One of those?
I think 10.
I think.
Yeah, one of the classes is called Christ and Culture or something like that.
Isn't Christian Church?
I don't know.
I think that's church and culture, morality. It's a grade 12 one. I took it last year.
Okay, well, regardless. So, you know, the United States is a great example of this. Canada is not such a great example because in Canada, we don't see the phenomenon or culture, if you will, of people, you know, becoming diehard, you know, members of a political party. That's not to say people aren't diehard political party members. There are definitely people who are always going to vote conservative, or always going to vote liberal, always going to vote NDP. But in the United States, it's very different. It's a cultural thing to the you know, the grain of their existence almost. You know, we have undecided voters, but it makes up a very small percentage of the population. And so basically what political culture is, like it says, the way in which the political system is inserted into a larger social reality of beliefs, attitudes, values, and norms. So if you think about the far right and Trump and his followers, you know, you think about, you know, Protestantism, right? Or far right religion, Christianity. You think about the far left, you think, you know, more moving away from that type of thing, right? And so politicians and groups of politicians know how to, you know, spread their belief systems and where to spread them and how it works, right? So we have customs, beliefs, expectations, symbols, right? So, you know, customs are what's accepted, what people do. Beliefs are what the you know, we accept as being, you know, worldviews. Are humans selfish, or are we selfless, right? Things like that. Expectations, what ought to be or not ought to be done by the government, right? Big government or small government. The far right believes that the government should be small. The far left believes the government should be large. These types of things. And of course, symbols are huge. Symbolism is a very important aspect of political culture. You know, the anthem, the flags, the allegiance, etc. Right? Then we have laws, values, institutions, skills, etc. And you know, when we talk about values, if go back to the you know, human rights, you know, we have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada. Many countries have declarations. Even the United States has their own version, but does it make it universal? Is it played out universally? Is it interpreted? These are the things that differ between governments, times, and countries, etc. Influences. There are many ways in which members of society acquire and pass along their attitudes and values about the political system. You know, we're just talking about influences in terms of the media, right? Who controls the media? Does the far right media, are they in cahoots with the far right politicians, or vice versa? Or does one influence the other? Does one own the other? These are the types of things that many people research, write about, speculate on, right? Etc. Right? So some very key, you know, some key people who wrote about politics were, of course, Karl Marx. You know, these people, Friedrich Engels, who's not as known, but he was basically buddies with Karl Marx, and of course Mao Zedong. You know, Karl Marx wasn't a politician. He basically, you know, arguably wrote a warning. That was the manifesto, the Communist Manifesto, saying, you know, if the government doesn't change the ways, then the proletariat, the everyday people will rise up and try to take back, you know, power, basically. Because in Europe at the time, you know, monarchs and monarchy was big. Control of the small government was big, and you know, more people were poor than there were anybody else. Now, of course, people took his writings and created political affiliations with them, movements, etc. And then, you know, of course, we still see long-lasting effects of those things with certain countries that still exist today, and their political systems that were now loosely based on these ideas. China, USSR, Cuba, Vietnam, you know, many countries, etc. You know, family is a big one. You know, we're talking about in Brave New World, they talk about there's 3 rules. No family, no monogamy, and I think the last one's no privacy. Let me Google that one. No privacy, no family, no monogamy. Right? So what does that mean? This is what I'm talking about. The far right accuses the far left of wanting this. Others say that if we're not careful with going either way, Aldous Huxley basically forewarned that if we continue on the path that he forewarned, that's what's going to end up, right? A lot of people are scared of the idea that if we continue to talk about gender as being fluid, then the extreme outcome will be that no one will even be allowed to identify as anything, right? Which is a slippery slope in the world of philosophy. But these are the things that fear is used to manipulate, right? And big things in politics are gender roles. We're talking about the left and the right, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and human rights, rights of the individual, equal rights. What is a woman supposed to do? Is she supposed to have kids and stay home? Because once upon a time, and there's still places in the world that believe this, people that believe this. Is that a wrong and old, antiquated belief? It's just a belief. And it's up to you to figure that one out for yourself, right? Certain establishments have their own belief systems. And then, of course, they are influencing politics, right? The media chooses, or do they choose? Depends on where we are. What gets reported, who doesn't get reported. If you take a look at that graph that Sada wrote, you'd be interested to see who owns all those outlets. And some of them on the far left and the far right are owned by the same people. So when you know this, how does that change your opinion about the news? Does it change your opinion that some of the things that the news article or outlets on the left and the right are owned by the same people? Well, which side does Disney work on or live on, exist on?
I mean, most of these, they don't really have a side. It's just like corporate. So whatever.
Right.
Say that again. Didn't what? Didn't who?
Disney was on the very far. I began on a very far right side, right?
Disney's left right now.
Is left now, but used to be right.
It's literally a mega corporation. How is it leftist?
Yeah.
Literally a what corporation?
Like it's a corporation.
It's a mega corporation. It's gigantic. It's like one of the biggest conglomerates in the world. How is it leftist?
Corporations can take sides.
Yeah, but like being center left is not the same as being leftist.
There are many corporations that align themselves or support different sides of views, left views or right views. Just because it's a corporation doesn't mean that the people that are part of it or the people that they hire don't share the same views.
Okay, then you're talking about the people that they hire, not the corporation itself.
No, of course, the corporation itself isn't even an entity.
What you need to do before you continue, listen to me, please. Before you continue, because one of the most important things when we're having a discussion is not to get emotional. But that aside, read a book called Freakonomics. And if you can't read, they've made a movie adaptation of the documentary. And in it, they argue that corporations, if they were human, would be locked up in a psych ward, right? And so, you're both wrong and you're both right at the same time. Companies, big or small, will have mandates. And seemingly, these mandates will lean left, lean right. But to distinguish a person from the corporation is very difficult because we tend to talk about corporations as being entities alive, just like we talk about the government or, the party. These are all just made up stories. Corporations, countries, they do not exist. They are literally just a made-up story. And they've gained a life of their own, right? So there's an interesting book that explains it too called Sapiens. It's a rather new book. I'm sure you might have heard about it. And they discuss that fact. So, understand that. Going back, it's very important. And if you can't do it, breathe or take philosophy class. When having a discussion, not to get emotional. Because as soon as you get emotional, you've lost your argument, you've lost your position. Nobody's going to listen to you because it becomes a battle. And this is the problem with what's happening in the United States right now, especially, whereas there's become a battle between the left and the right, almost like a civil war. And as soon as that happens, people are irrational. They don't even think about what they're talking about. They just defend their side. And if that's what happens, then your argument's lost. You have to not defend your side, but listen to the other side and influence the other side, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I remember there was this quote I saw from Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She said that you should defend your side, but do it in a way that other people will listen to you as well.
Wise words, right?
Yeah.
Wise words.
I think in the end, corporations, it's more about their public image. So if the majority of people believe in something, they might as well, as a society, as we develop, the corporations are going to change their mind as well,
So the weird thing about corporations, take a look at
the end of it, it's really just about profit.
Wait,
about
hold
what?
on, but of course corporations can have a side. I don't understand how it's any different than, how is it any different than
No, I'm just saying the political views of a corporation is dependent on whatever's more profitable. Normally it's more profitable to stay in the center to appeal to everyone.
It has nothing to do with the fact that it's not a corporation that doesn't let it have a side. I mean, we just spoke about news articles or news article outlets that are able to take sides, right? And those are conglomerations of people, which are corporations in and of themselves. Any other corporation acts the same way. Any group of people or any kind of entity can have a certain bias towards a certain side. It's exactly the same as news corporations, right? Those are corporations. Those fit into a side. We just spoke about that. Any other company like Disney or Apple or whatever company it is can also follow the same rules. They too can also fit on a side.
Yeah, I'm not arguing against that. I'm just saying it's not about morals when it comes to political views of corporations. It's about profit. Look at Disney, the way they're kind of bending to the will of the Chinese government, same with the NBA. It's because they want to make money off of them. They don't really care at the end of the day in what they believe, so long as they can make a quick buck off of it.
But
so,
listen.
Don't put too much stoke in what they think.
Did you just hear what I said? We have to stop. I'm not disagreeing with you or agreeing with you at all. What I'm saying is it's way too easy to talk about corporations, regardless of what they are, as being live entities, right? You gotta figure out how to change the mindset on how we look at, I was about to say people like Disney, because that's the point, right? It's hard. It's very, very hard because when somebody, and that's what I was about to say before, somebody creates a business, it starts off as being usually one person or a very small group of people's, personal endeavor. So you look at Apple, right? Apple was created by Steve Jobs and Wozniak. Is his name Steve Wozniak too? Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apple ended up firing Steve Jobs. His own company fired him because it became an entity of its own. Almost like he gave birth to it. And then when this happens, and it happens to every single institution, that it might have been the brainchild of one person, their ideas, but as soon as it becomes an institution, it becomes its own entity. and we talk about it's very difficult to distinguish between what's real and what's not, because it seems like they're their own entity. It seems like they have their own, like for instance, you keep saying Disney just wants to make money or whatever, and they're bowing down to China and stuff. I don't know. That could be true. That could be not true. But the point is, why is that happening? Is it because, it's not as black and white as, well, they're changing rules or they're changing the way they operate because China won't let them, play their movies, so that they have to change what they do so that they make money. Well, these are very, very interesting topics that people debate, very high PhD level people debate, whether or not they're, what the real evidence behind these things are, because it's impossible to know. Yes, companies big and small have manifestos, right? And sometimes these manifestos will be very far left leaning, very far right leaning. You guys ever seen a company called Bob's Red Mill? They sell like grain products.
Oh, is that the grains and the
yeah, like oatmeal and dried
yeah.
stuff like that. They are clear about their manifesto right on the box, that they're the type of company that all the employees are actually partial owners of the company, right? So, by theory, it's a socialist company, right? There's not one CEO other than, I don't know what percentage this Bob guy owns of the company. Whereas other companies, it's a very clear understanding that they're very capitalist, and they have to keep growing and keep making more money and things like that. I was watching a show the other day. It was like, I don't remember what it was, but the father, like the couple, right? The father gets fired at work. And the reason he was fired was this. The boss comes in his office and says, "I'm sorry, we're going to have to let you go. An algorithm told us that you're not worth as much as you are." So they fired him. So what does that mean? It means that the work he does, according to this computer program, is not worth him being paid to do.
Sir, I was hearing about like a Christian CEO, and he gave everybody basically the more money they got, the living wage of the lowest people in the company got higher. I think everybody was paying like $70,000 or something. Like the lowest money that they got was that.
Yeah. Well, regardless, the whole point I'm trying to make, going back to, is you have to try to not see corporations and companies as living entities, because they're really they're a story, they're fake, they're not real. And humans give them a story. And if you want to know more about that, you should watch or read Freakonomics, because it's really interesting, or Sapiens. And it'll change your viewpoint on how you'll see companies, because a lot of people vilify companies, like that's, Disney's the devil, they say, or what have you, right? But is it Disney or certain individuals behind?
Well, yeah, like, sorry.
Yeah, that's
on to your point, kind of speaking as to like when everyone was talking about whether Disney stood on which side of the spectrum. Like, it wasn't Disney, because Disney's, honestly, it's just a bunch of cartoons. But like I think Bob Iger is his name.
I don't know. Bob's Red Mill, whatever his name is. Yeah. Yeah,
whatever. He himself has his own political opinion. Like he co-hosted a fundraiser for Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, and has obviously evidently stated his own political beliefs, and that can easily be, interpreted as, because I don't know if he still is, the CEO of Disney, those beliefs then are trickled down throughout the company.
Yeah. But of course, if you know how a corporation works, the one figurehead CEO, if that, can easily be removed if they don't follow the will of the rest of the stakeholders. That's autocratism, right? Just like we saw in the movie. There's the one figurehead, but who really has the power?
Everyone
Right?
else. But it goes also into like one of the answers that was saying that because he wasn't kicked out. He hasn't been kicked out of being the CEO of Disney, which then, gives anyone justifiable reasoning to assume that him being in that position, having that ideology, is then supported by others within the company.
Sure.
And is, in sense, a testament to what the company is trying to portray itself.
Yeah. Or they knew he was who he was, and that's why he was put into that position, right?
Or that.
Or that. You'll never know. Okay. So that being said, control of information is very, very important when it comes to the media, government, corporations, etc. And that's a big thing when we talk about politics, right? What gets released, what doesn't, what gets reported, what doesn't. Censorship. Certain countries have more censorship than others. Certain political organizations in power censor more than others. Every year St. Rob's has a lot of kids from China, and often these kids from China, maybe there's some in this class right now, have no idea about Tiananmen Square or this picture. Let me show you. Or what this means. And in the West, this picture has become, very, very, very important. And there's a lot of students who are your age in your class who have absolutely no idea what this is. Right?
Sir, I remember like my history classes. I've had like 9 years of history, and they were really biased. Like there were some things I never learned in class, and I just like searched them up myself. And
Where?
that's when I found, like in Iran.
Oh yeah, of course, right? Last year I taught a grade 10 history course, and it was an ESL history course. There was like 13 kids in that class, and I think 4 or 5 of them were from mainland China, and they had no idea what this was. They've never seen this picture. Never heard of what happened. They know what Tiananmen Square is, where it is, but they don't know the history, right? And it's because China has done its best to eliminate this story from their history, and that's censorship, right? This photo was actually taken by a Westerner who was there and able to sneak out the photo. And in the West, this symbolism, it symbolizes, it symbolizes a lot of things, but standing up to oppression or, does anybody not know what this is about? Matthew? Tiananmen Square. Can anybody explain it? I'd love it if somebody who's from China would explain this. Connor Ren, are you from China? Do you know what this is?
Yes, definitely. Yes, I'm from China, and I hear about the Tiananmen Square massacre then after I came to Canada.
Yeah.
And it's a student movement, and is in Beijing, and in 1989, and it's a peaceful movement, but the government killed all the students and all the protesters by using army.
Yeah. So basically, thank you, Connor. In history, many, regardless of what country, what government, what have you, those governments that have been of the type that are more controlling than others have typically been scared of the educated person, right? And why do you think that's the case?
Sir, in most countries, like when there's a protest or something, it's often the university students and students.
Right.
Because when you're
Yeah.
educated, you know what's wrong. Like when you don't even know your rights or what is going on and what is happening and what's the right thing to do, you're not even gonna do anything.
Well, there you go, right? So one nod to education, the importance of education. Although that's not really a good lesson, because if you're educated, you might get hurt. But that's a joke. But yeah, so in China, for instance, in this particular time, there was a big movement in the universities, free thinkers, if you will, and the government was very, very much, I don't know what word to use, afraid. I mean, it's debated, right? Because nobody really knows. But there are many political commentators, historians who talk about it, afraid that there'll be a giant movement to topple the government or the system in which is set in place. And so, anyway, so we're talking about the media, right? That particular picture was everywhere in North America in 1989, but very much censored in other parts of the world. So this one here, separation of church and state and the atheist effect on politics is a very important one too, because right-leaning and left-leaning fit also into the type of religion or spirituality or belief system that people have. And it goes hand in hand with these things, right? When we talk about the far right, very much against abortion, for instance, or euthanasia, and the far left basically wanting the opposite, freedom of body, often religion comes into play in this. It doesn't have to, it doesn't always, but often it does. So, the reasons many people cite why abortion is wrong is they'll use a religious aspect to it, or life is sacred, or so forth. Now, that's not to say there are many atheists who also believe that abortion is wrong for different reasons. Life is life, right? Regardless of your belief system, and so forth. Education. Now, obviously, the government controls the curriculum in many parts of the world, some more than others. In Canada, we have a very interesting system because in some provinces, many provinces actually, we don't have the Catholic system anymore. Even in Ontario, I remember there was a guy in the religion department, head of the religion department in the board, not even in a school. I took a course with him, and he told us like 15 years ago that in 10 years, there'll be no more Catholic board in Ontario. It's been 15 years now, it still exists. But if you guys, the percentage of Catholics versus non-Catholics in the Catholic board is like 20 or less percent, and so many people question why we have a Catholic board still, and other people have their reasons for justifying it, right? Again, totally your opinion, etc. That being said, politics, makes its way into the education system. I don't know if you guys remember, as soon as Ford was elected and the Conservatives won, they changed the elementary school sex ed education curriculum. And many left-leaning people said that they're going backwards, in time and progression with the new curriculum, because it was really just going back to the old curriculum that the left had fought so hard to, change things. I'm not an elementary school teacher. I'm not 100% sure on what those things were specifically, but one thing that kept popping up in the media was the idea of consent, right? So it does influence, of course it does. The workplace, unions. Today we take unions as being something that just exists everywhere. But if you remember your grade 10 curriculum, the far left, or the left, I should say, very much fought for workers' rights, and it was, we can thank those people if you want to for having Saturdays and Sundays off. Not everybody, obviously, for maybe you don't like this, but not being able to work as a child. You wanted a job when you were 12, but sorry, you can't really have a job when you're 12. And there's a reason for it, right? Sure, you could have had your paper route or coach T-ball or something, but you couldn't work in a factory. But kids younger than you, 120 years ago, definitely had jobs in factories, right? Et cetera, et cetera. You lose your job, you can thank people from the past for being able to support you, right? Now, of course, Canada is understood to be a left-leaning, overall social progressive country historically. And of course, it's a new country. Canada's only 150, 3 years old. And we are influenced by the British, the French, the Americans, and a lot of things. So, this is a little activity we can talk about, but it's already 2, and we've had a nice discussion. But we don't have to go too much detail. But just think about what types of influences maybe we got from these types of organizations or movements, if you will, right? Can anyone want to talk about that, or we can move on? We've already I know. I like to talk. I like to have discussions. It's already been an hour and a half. Now, nations and states. I think we talked about what is a state, what is a nation. It's something that's not as black and white as is usually portrayed, right? A nation is a group of people with a set common biological and psychological characteristics, often, argued this way. So the Métis, the French Canadians, refer to themselves as the Nation of Quebec, right? With that comes national identity. And this is very important because we're going to, tie it to the real world, especially the United States. And of course, if you remember anything about the 1930s and 40s in Germany, we see many, many similarities. Ethnic groups, races, tribes, if you will, almost believing themselves to be superior, right? Now, a state is a self-governing political entity. So the state is kind of like the loosest term that we can use to identify a country, if you will. Right? They're self-governing political entity. That's what a state is. And then, of course, we have the sub things. We've already kind of talked about this, but what is Canada today? Yeah?
Is Israel really heterogeneous? Because there are only kind of 2 cultures there.
2 cultures?
Yeah. So by that definition that you say,
I would argue that Israel has much more than 2 cultures.
Oh.
Do you know any Jewish people?
Not that
There are
many, no.
Jewish people from Ethiopia, and there are Jewish people from Russia, and there are Jewish people from Japan. They all live in Israel. Definitely not a homogeneous culture. Right?
So like, but if like there's a certain group of people that they have like their, you know, their cultural, religious, and biological similarities, but they're not considered a country, like legally, would they still be called a nation?
Quebec is refers to themselves as a nation, right? Look at the Austro-Hungarian Empire, for instance. Today, can you see the map on behind me right here?
Isn't Hungary nearing pretty close to dictatorship within their government?
Well, yeah, I mean, okay. One thing you have to understand about the ex-communist Soviet countries is that they were not under the Soviet rule by choice, right? So who is that? Well, Hungary, obviously. You know, the Romania, Bulgaria, Czech Republic. There's a whole bunch of them, right? And a phenomenon happened, and it does happen often, and it even happened in Canada 2 years ago, and I'll explain that in a second, where people's ideologies go from one extreme to the other. So they lived in Hungary, and it happened in all those other countries too, in a Soviet far left regime for decades. And as soon as the Iron Curtain fell, what did they do? They went all the way to the other side. So far right. Right? With the fear that if we ever vote in anybody who is even remotely left-leaning, well, they're going to end up being a Soviet country again. And you know how that turned out for us. So Hungary, for instance, is very much like that. And the people's belief is very much like that, where, you know, we remember how horrible life was under the Soviet regime. So we better make sure we never, ever even remotely accept any type of left-leaning government. Now they voted in, you know, what's his name? Orban. He's been in power for quite a while now. And he uses that mentality that the Hungarians have. Again, I'm making a blanket statement, not 100% here, but almost historically, this has been shown to be like that. And he used that ability to further his right agenda. Right? Does that make sense? Or answer your question at all? Did I lose you?
I think she's frozen.
Oh no. Okay, I should do talk to text and then write everything down. Okay, so homogeneous and heterogeneous states. This is Canada versus United States. In Canada, we're considered a tossed salad. What does a tossed salad look like? Well, you have your different vegetables, your different items that you cut in and chop up into the salad. You mix them all up. But when you look at it, you can distinguish every single.
Why is it at this point is everything?
Is often called a thing, a whole bunch of ingredients.
Am I frozen?
Am I frozen? Same thing happened yesterday. I think the computer is annoyed that I'm talking so much.
It likes to leg you at it too.
All right. Ah, my goodness. Okay, well, this is how about I post, let's go back here. All right. Okay, well, you'll notice that I posted a lot of stuff. Basically, a lot of it is just kind of the notes that are in that huge PowerPoint. We'll continue that PowerPoint tomorrow. It's only 15 of 58, but I guess it's all the same. Let me see if there's anything that I can have you read right now. Okay, read the Religion in Politics document for the rest of the class. Any questions? What are the key things we learned today? When having a discussion,
Not to get emotional.
do not get emotional. Who is the philosopher that said reason is the slave to emotions?
Mr.
Was it
Molnar.
you? Mr. Molnar said that. Well, I paraphrased that. But,
Don't raise your voice and prove your argument.
prove against your argument. Yeah, it's true. It's true. As soon as you do that, but it's very difficult, and I understand it's very difficult for full-grown adults, let alone teenagers. Did you say we have homework? No, I didn't say we have homework. I said for the rest of the class, read the Religion and Politics document. But yeah, it's very important to stay cool. Oh, my neck. Okay, awesome. So I'm still here, but you don't have to be.
Have an amazing day, sir.
Yeah, you too. Peace out.
Read the document.
Read the document.
Bye, sir.